Welcome to Beyond Pipeline. We talk about how to win the inner game of sales. My name is John Arbush, and I'm your host. And today we have a very, very special guest. He's the founder and CEO of tasales.com and has created the Kaizen Collective. Without further ado, Tom Alaimo. Tom,
Woo.
how are you?
I'm excited to be here, man. I'm doing good. How are you, John?
Dude, I'm very stoked to have you on. I know you've done like 350 podcast episodes in your life, maybe more. Yeah, I feel very comfortable just knowing that you know what you're doing and we're hanging out, we're having fun. And I'm excited just to learn from you today, man, and just share what's made you successful as an AE and but also just the man behind the screen as well. So I'm very, very excited.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, man. So with that being said, let's dive in. Like, let's just start. Let's just do a softball one. How did you get into? Can you help us understand how you got into sales? Let's just start there.
Yeah. So, despite all the stuff that we're saying about running a business and being in sales and doing a podcast, I'm actually very naturally introverted. I was very shy as a kid. I would hide from people when they came over the
Really?
house,
Okay.
that type of vibe. And so, sales was never really something that was on my purview. But I'm very competitive. I was a scholarship tennis player in college. And one summer, I would usually teach, like a camp during summer. And one summer after my freshman year of college, I got shoulder surgery, so I couldn't teach. And so I was trying to figure out, a way to maybe make some money. And I saw a neon flyer at a grocery store parking lot that said, "Make money, work your own hours." And I said, "That sounds pretty cool to me." And my mom knew that this was going to be for Cutco knives. Are you familiar with Cutco, John?
I'm familiar with the general stigma around it and things like that. So feel free to share because I really don't know that
Yeah.
much about it, but I am familiar with some of the business model.
Yeah. Okay. So, Cutco knives, more or less, it's you're selling expensive knives to strangers in their home. And it's mostly like high school and college kids doing it, and it's almost 100% commission. And if 98% of people hate it and quit within a couple weeks, and the 2% that stick with it and do really well can actually make a lot of money. And it's a great training ground if you are actually want to be in sales. So my mom discouraged me from doing that, just knowing my kind of intrinsic vibe. But I said I was going to go for it anyway. So I remember showing up. I'm wearing a suit for some reason. I've got a sling on one arm because of my surgery, and then I've got a bag, of knives and like fruits and vegetables and stuff in the other arm, and showing up to people's houses and doing demos. And on day one, or maybe probably day two or three, after they give you a little bit of training, you start with people you know. So I remember my boss it's like, hey, you got to write down, the names and numbers of 25 people that you know. It's like your aunt, your little league coach, your whoever, your neighbor. And I just remember being terrified that he gives me a script and we're all in this big conference room and you got to call people that you know and try to set up a
Oh
meeting
my
for them to
God.
show them these knives. And I just remember being so out of my element and, praying that people wouldn't answer the phone. And even some people that would pick up, I would hang up on them, which is a terrible way to make money if you're in sales, is hanging up on potential customers. And so, despite that, it ended up being a great summer, and we could talk more about it. But that was my gateway, and I got some great coaching on the skills and on the mental side, even at that age, and that got me over the hump. And once I got past some of those initial hurdles, I was off and running. And from that point on, it was sales or bust, and I didn't really look in any other direction.
I absolutely love that. It sounds like you kind of just jumped in. I want to hold on to this for a second. What was your first win like with that? Like, did you get a sale? And if so, like, what did the first sale feel like? Because like, I feel when people really dive in and get obsessed about stuff, it's because they had an early win. They kind of just jumped on
Mm.
it and then went forward. Like, can you walk me through that really quick? Even if you didn't sell anything, I will not judge you. It's a very hard way to sell.
No, I did. I sold over $25,000 worth of knives. I was
Oh
number
wow.
7 in all of New England. I was like, and actually, how Cutco goes is the more you sell, the higher your commission. So at the end, I was getting 50% commission. So $1,000 knives in an hour, you can make $500. So, anyways, I don't remember my first sale, but I do remember one, pretty early on. I remember I had demos and appointments lined up throughout the day, and it's the last one of the day. And it's this guy that has like a really, really big and nice house. And you think going into this house, like, oh, this guy's gonna spend some money. He's got money. But it was actually the reverse. He was so he was just pushing me on every little bit of every knife and wanting me to cut the sweet potato this way and what's the warranty and this and that. And I remember usually I might be somewhere for 45 minutes. We cut up some fruit and veggies and we're kind of on our way. And I'm there for like 3 hours. It's like almost 10 p.m. And I remember getting the deal and I called my like manager and was just telling him the story and I was fired up. And he started calling me. He was like, dude, you are the ultimate grinder. And we were talking before we recorded about just, the grind sometimes of sales. And I just kind of internalized that as like, man, I could get the job done. And I compared that to sports a lot of just like, I'm not the biggest guy, I'm not the strongest guy, but
Yeah.
like I do have endurance and I do get gritty. And I just felt like it applied really well to that job and to other sales jobs that I've had too. Just that mentality.
Yeah, and I feel like those early wins are so key too. So good for you for just grinding it out. And obviously, you are who you are today. So okay, you do the Cutco. You're in college. How the heck do you then get into SaaS sales?
Yeah. So I took a couple internships at like an insurance company and a few other companies while I was in college. And it was really, coincidental or, fate or whatever you want to call it. But um my senior year of college, I was going to a career fair. I came straight from tennis practice. I had all my gear on and everything. And I started striking up a conversation with a woman who also plays tennis. And she was one of the recruiters for a company called TechTarget. And we hit it off. We probably didn't talk about grades or classes or anything like that. We were just talking about tennis. And before I knew it, I had an internship offer for that, like my senior year, and did some work there throughout that summer, and then at the end, got an offer to work there, and that's how I spent the first almost 6 years of my career was at that company. And so, outside of the Cutco summer, that's where I really, cut my teeth and learned so much just about the art and the science of
Mhm.
sales. And man, I got lessons for days on that. But I didn't know what I was doing. I wasn't looking at, Oracle and Salesforce and big companies. I just wanted a job and I wanted to
Yeah.
make some money. And I wanted to just like get that off my plate and get my foot in the door somewhere and just figure it out. So I didn't even really know what software sales was until I was already there.
Yeah. Yeah, that I share some of that story. That being said, I know you were a high performer at TechTarget. What was your progression like? Did you do the whole 12-month SDR thing and then AE? And like I want to dive a little more into what made you successful, but can you help us understand your progression there during those 6 years?
Yeah. So this is like 10 years ago. So I'm gonna try to get the timelines right. But yeah, you start in. It was pretty cool back then. At least they put you through like fairly intense training. I think it was for like a couple months. Like you wouldn't even hit the phones, and they taught you about sales. They taught you about the industry, and it was a lot of old EMC folks, and they did a really
Okay.
good job of training. Then you come in entry level, kind of like SDR, graduate to full cycle sales. After about a year, I got promoted and moved out west from Boston to San Francisco. And then from there, I was working, with probably like 100 like commercial-ish type of accounts. After another year I moved up and was working more enterprise, and then after a year or two after that I got sales rep of the year and was closing millions of dollars a year. Then I was a global like strategic rep, so I had 3 accounts. Then I was a player coach manager, so I managed 4 or 5 reps while also selling. And that was all, every year to year and a half over like the 5 or 6 years. And then I left there in 2020.
Okay, nice. So obviously you crushed it. You went from SDR to AE pretty quick, and then you climbed the ranks there. I know you're very into like self-development, develop 1%, getting 1% better every single day. what were some of the key things you think enabled you to be so successful at TechTarget and grow as a rep? Especially now, I want to think back to likely AEs listening to this. So, what were some of the key things that you did to progress that set you apart?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. One, and this might be something you're not expecting, is like I did not give a shit about what people thought about me, really. And I did the things a lot differently. Like I was the guy, walking around like without my shoes on a call, just walking around the office. I was the guy that got into the office at 5:30, 6 in the morning and did my podcast in like this small conference room that had good acoustics and was like the weird guy that had a podcast. That, like that's not a thing that most people do.
Mm-hmm.
And just because of doing stuff like that, I learned so much. I learned so much from having a podcast. I learned so much from, I would after a certain period of time, I didn't stop drinking entirely, but stopped, I was partying like 5, 6 days a week. And I pretty much stopped that and started becoming obsessed with reading books and
Mm-hmm.
going to, events like the Tony Robbins 4-day seminars and
Yes.
different things like that. Running a bunch of Spartan races, marathons, and, just things that I think not a lot of people in their young 20s are doing. And it was harder to make friends, truthfully in the office. But I think just like being a little bit weird and owning that was certainly a big part of it. Um, let's see. I think the other part, alongside that is just like getting I think the most I learned about sales did not come from sales books necessarily. It came from personal development. It came from biographies. It came from, mentors and,
Mm-hmm.
even virtual mentors, people that I don't know, but I follow them religiously. And I just know things about like, even though they're not in sales, I'm taking what they're teaching and applying it to my own world. So I felt like I learned way more from that than reading, Never Split the Difference or, some other sales. Oh, there's some good sales books, but I just felt like I always learned more from doing those other things. And and then just like great people in like I had some great leaders. There were some great reps at that. Just it was a sales company at TechTarget. Like
Mm-hmm.
salespeople ran the company, and they were just some boss salespeople. And I looked up to them, and I got to go on some meetings with them. And I remember, going. I split the Microsoft account. Like I was the junior guy that was like prospecting, and then there was a more senior rep, and we'd go to Washington together and like go to the Microsoft campus. And I just learned so much from doing things like that with really great salespeople 5 to 10 years ahead of me.
Yeah.
And just try to pick up the little nuances of what they did. And yeah, man, I just at a certain point just became like so obsessed with the learning and growth and development and how do I reach my potential? How do I get to the next step? That it just like that was the most exciting thing in my life more than all the other type of stuff.
Yeah. So it sounds like the one just having an environment where there's really good sales reps was obviously helpful, but really the personal development aspect, working
Yeah.
on yourself, going to Tony Robbins stuff, maybe not drinking as much. What caused the change though? You mentioned you went from 5 to 6 nights a week going out potentially to being more focused on self development. Like that's really a big decision there. What caused the change and what was that like for you?
Yeah, there were two big moments. One was right as I was transitioning from moving from Boston to San Francisco. That was a big move. I'd only lived in the Boston area my whole life. So moving across the country, not knowing anyone, never even been there before, was pretty scary. And just felt like a new chapter. And I remember I came across the book. I don't know how, but I came across To Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You're nodding as if you know that and have
Very
read
good
that.
book. Yeah.
Um, and what stood out to me, you might laugh at this, is like I the concept of a growth mindset was very unfamiliar to me. When you go to school, it's just like you study this. I'm good at math, I'm bad at English. I suck at science, but I'm kind of funny. I'm just like I
Mhm.
have these fixed things about me, and it had never occurred to me really that like, oh, I can get that much better at something. And
Yeah.
like I can like the world is run by people that generally for the most part, aren't that much smarter than me. There's some outliers. I'm not, Elon Musk or something, but most people that are running businesses and are successful, they're not absurdly smart. They've just really applied themselves and they work hard and they learn things and they grow and they surround themselves with great people. All that was foreign. And so that book got me on a tear of just like going down, the rabbit hole of personal development, which led me to, all these other books, led me to the Tony Robbins thing, which led to more things in health and wellness and that type of stuff. So that was like the really big first domino for me.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was more of this belief of, okay, my development's not static. Like what I have right now, the engine I have to work with, which is like me and my current capabilities, things like that. Like you can modify, you can grow, you can add a turbocharger to it, right? You can modify yourself. What did that belief for that? Yeah, what did that belief about yourself do for you in terms of what you thought was possible for you in your future?
Well, I think it got me to even think about what was possible. I think before that I felt like I was more so just like one step ahead of where thinking one step ahead of where I am and didn't really have grand visions of, what I could achieve or what money I could make or what impact I could have. And one of the first things that Napoleon Hill teaches in that book is you find what is the I don't remember the exact verbiage, but you find, what is the number one goal that you have, and you write down a contract with yourself of, by X date, I intend to
Mhm.
achieve, Y thing. And in order to achieve that, I am going to, sacrifice Z. I'm going to work this hard or do these things or give this up. Um, and I would, I had about a 15-minute walk to the office in San Francisco from where I lived. And the year that I had my best sales year, I was sales rep of the year of the company. And I ran my first marathon. I'd never ran more than 3 miles before at the beginning of the year. And every day walking to the office, I would have a verbal visualization of crossing the finish line and of shaking my SVP of sales hand at the sales kickoff the next year. And I would be describing it out loud in very specific detail. Say he's wearing a navy blue button down shirt, and I see my name on the photo, and I'm coming up. I'm in the fifth row on the left side, and I come up and I shake his hand, and I hold the trophy in my left hand, and I do the same thing in the marathon. I'm saying this out loud with like some intensity to it, and
Yeah.
people are looking at me and they're like, "What is it? What's this guy doing?" And all of that to say that like I fixed my mind on one or two really important goals for me and just was relentless about them. And so I prioritize those. And I'm not saying that this is the right thing for everyone and not the right thing for everyone at any given point, but I prioritize those things ahead of making a lot of friends, ahead of certain
Yeah.
relationships, ahead of, other things in life. And now my priorities, are somewhat in some ways the same, in some ways they're different. I'm getting married this year, and there's other things in life that, I'm focused on. So, but I do think really trying to figure out what are the one or two, three things that matter most, and just like having a fixed, purpose on, how can you get to achieve those or become that person or, get to that level that you need to get to.
Yeah. I really resonate and love just the conviction you had around what you did want to achieve and your willingness to, again, the incantations or the affirmations, whatever you want to call them, just doing that, going to the office, putting in the work, being willing to prioritize that. What what how did you go about knowing that? Like, 'cause you throw out the word values, and I think people hear that a lot, but they don't really know what it means, and they don't really know how to choose their values. Like, how did you go about defining what your value, like what a value was for you, and then how you actually wanted to prioritize them? So I think that dictates a lot of people's lives, and it's I think a force that a lot of people don't understand, and so they have
Mm.
these conflicts of what to do, and they feel uncertain, things like that where really it's just a clarification of values. So can you walk us through how you define a value and then how you got clear on what values are important to you at that point in time?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would define a value or, maybe say it interchangeably as like a life priority in
Hmm.
some ways where it's we only have so much time and attention and, energy. So we can only do so many things. We can only be so many places, be around so many people. And so there's often conflicts. I've got a work dinner invitation and I've got an invite to hang out with friends. I've got to, I want to finish this podcast, but I've got, my grandma's birthday party. There's these things that happen in life. And so if you don't have a clear set of values and priorities, all those decisions are really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I'm a big believer that there's seasons of life. And so have been seasons of life where I lived far away from my family and I didn't really have many friends. And all day Sunday was like my podcast day, and I was working and I was up at 5 in the morning doing podcasts, during the weekday and then going to work. And like that was my priority. I wanted to get ahead. I wanted to put in the hours in my 20s so that I could have more opportunity in my 30s and 40s. That was just the decision that came from my heart. You asked why, how. I think it just comes from like some self reflection and just like being true to what you think is right. Um, and now, those change. I don't work all day Sundays now. I work really hard during the week and I put in an hour or two to prep, but there's certain things that, I prioritize when it comes to family. Now I live closer to family and I moved to Chicago to be closer to them versus being in San Francisco. So there are, I think, you're allowed to change what some of those priority and stack ranking looks like. And you can do that as often as it's going to serve you. But I think it really comes from a conversation you want to have internally with yourself and maybe even with people that are most important to you. If there's people here that are married, that have kids, that have some other life circumstances that they need to kind of figure out. But know what those priorities are and go accordingly. Same with you got a full-time job, you have a side hustle, all these types of things. What do you want life to look like a few years from now? And that's a pretty good gauge of what you should be prioritizing now, because that's when the fruits of your labor are going to come.
Yeah, I want to pull that thread for people of
Yeah.
defining what do you want life to look like 3 to 5 years from now, and then let's work backwards and then define the priorities that have to happen today.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I really respect you the way you're thinking about that, and it kind of brings me comfort because I am a few years behind you and I'm thinking about things similarly. So that is also good. What do you think keeps people from defining their priorities and having the conviction that you did? Because you obviously had some conviction. You're like, I know where I want to go. I'm gonna walk to work. I'm gonna do these incantations, and then I'm gonna actually do the actions. I'm gonna wake up at 5 or get to the office by 5, do the podcast, work. Like, what gave you that conviction? How? What do you think causes so many people to struggle with having that conviction to actually go after and do what they want to do in their life?
Yeah. It's, I think it's fairly simple. I think it comes to two things. One is, you've got to do some inward reflection on like what do you want. So it's not I'm looking at the Instagram of someone else and I wish that I had their money or their six pack or their, trip to, the Amalfi Coast or whatever it is. It comes from looking inward. So it comes from time spent with yourself, journaling, thinking, meditating, praying, whatever it is for you that like gets you, you could really get to like the true essence of yourself. And then I think the thing from there is just like fear of other people's opinions,
Yeah.
and that's the difference between that conviction is like, do I care about what other people think? And do I believe that I can do it? Am I afraid that if I do, burn the boats, if I do go for it, if I do leave, like when I left Gong, it's like, there was definitely thoughts in my mind. I'm like, man, if I go for this and I don't make it, I'm pretty public about all this stuff I'm doing. Like, I'm going to look like an idiot, and so those thoughts come into your head and you have to find a way to make your self-belief higher than what those doubts are and
Mhm.
make it so they drown out the doubts, where it makes sense. And just know that there's people that are going to be booing you. There's people that are going to be teasing you. Been made fun of by a lot of people for having a podcast and being a LinkedIn influencer, LinkedIn lunatic, all this type of stuff. And you just got to know that that's part of the price. If this is what you're talking about, it's part of the price of working a certain amount of time. If you want to make a certain amount of money in sales, it's worth a certain price to do anything that's really, hard, whether we're talking about sales or something outside of that. And, I think it's being realistic about what the price is and being willing to pay it
Yeah,
or not.
I like that a lot. It's just being realistic about what the price is for what you want to actually have happen next 3 to 5 years, which I don't think a lot of people these days are willing to pay the price. Some people are, but some people aren't. And I think I like that phrasing a lot. How would you give yourself the permission to not care about what other people thought, though? Because I think that's a big thing. I want to double down on here. You're giving me a lot of really good nuggets, so I'm just gonna keep diving in. What because I understand what you mean by that, and I know because I felt those moments too. But like for someone that's just like, man, I'm scared shitless about what people think. Like I want to start a podcast, or I want to start posting on LinkedIn, or I don't know, I want to go start my own business like you have, and like what we'll talk about in a little bit. But like, how do you what advice do you have for people who really have a hard time with people's judgment?
Well, I think first of all, I would just like give yourself some grace because that's hardwired into every human. We're tribal creatures, right? So
Yeah,
there's this ancient part of our brain that when someone is teasing us or making fun of us or looking down on us, that we're gonna get kicked out of the tribe, right? And then we're not gonna have a place to sleep tonight, and we're not gonna be able to eat, with the tribe or whatever. And we would die back in the caveman days. So that's still hardwired into us. So we got to give ourselves some grace. And it's not like I'm immune to that. I definitely still do care about what certain people think and at certain times. And I wish I didn't, but I do sometimes. But I read a really good book a while ago called The Courage to Be Disliked. And it was
who's that
recommended
by?
by me to a friend that was he was a very high level like NBA and Olympics basketball referee.
Okay,
And if you're a referee, uh, all of the fans hate you at one point or another in the
yeah,
game, right? Because you're calling it against their team. And he read that, and it's got kind of like a Zen type of thought process to it. But I think at the end of the day, um, you know, uh, I've done plenty of things to appease other people, and it's made me feel kind of like shit.
yeah,
And I'd rather it be the reverse. It's like I don't control their reaction to me setting a boundary, to me being weird, to me doing what I want to do, as long as I'm not hurting anyone, as long as I'm not being mean or rude or anything like that. But if it's just me, you know, doing weird stuff or, doing my own thing or having a big goal, then, and if that affects someone else, then I'm sorry that affects them. But that's no reason for me to be, changing the way that I want to live in like the short amount of time that we have. And in the short term, you might lose some friends, and you might have your feelings hurt. I definitely did. I did lose some friends early off in the content game and all that. Um, but what happens over time is the more that you're authentically yourself, the more you attract people into your sphere. So, the more like so let's just make this podcast as an example, right? As you're starting to reveal yourself and do these podcasts and post more on LinkedIn and social media, I bet there's people that are starting to get into your sphere that weren't there before, and they're like, hey, I kind of like what John's doing. I like your style, man. I like your hustle. You know, I didn't know you a year ago, or much less than that, but I like the enthusiasm you got. I like the content that you're doing.
thanks,
And
man.
so, um, I think in the long run, you just start to attract the right people into your sphere, and then okay, I'm on the right path.
Yeah, agree. And you're also going to have some haters
Yeah.
that throws some interesting comments in the comment section, but that's okay. Um,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I appreciate us going down that because I think we just covered some really good core pillars there. So with that being said, so what happens next? You kick butt at TechTarget, right? And I believe from my memory, look, I'm doing some research. You went to Gong. Was that Gong next? Is that what happened? Or was
I had a brief stint at another startup
okay?
during COVID time, Skill Jar,
That's right.
for
Okay.
about 6-ish months.
Okay.
So I was interviewing at there. I really wanted to work at Gong or Outreach because I was really just and still am obviously like very passionate about sales and sales tech. And in the middle of COVID, like summer of 2020, they both paused their hiring. And so they were kind of stringing me along a little bit just because they didn't have a role. And yeah, I needed to start making some money again. And so because I left TechTarget proactively, during COVID, which maybe wasn't a smart strategy. So, anyways, I got a job at Skilljar. Uh, Long story short, it was not a great environment. While I was there, Gong came back and was like, "Hey, the pool opened back up. Do you want to hop back in the ring?" I said, "Yep." And then at the end of 2020 is when I got that job, and that was a life changer for me.
How do you mean by that?
Well, everyone listening to this podcast, probably knows who Chris Orlob is, and that's who my boss was, and he was he hired me there. And in the interview process, he said, "If you give me 2 years, you're gonna wake up to a different life." And I'm like, "That sounds pretty bold, but okay." And he was right, and not only because of him or only because of Gong, but because of the work that I was doing. And it just so happened in the content world that my content started blowing up, and Gong was reaching new and new heights over those few years. And without going there at that time, I don't know if I would have been able to leave the corporate world as early as I did, because I did really well there, and then that helped some of the content, and it was just this kind of like gratuitous cycle that
Mhm.
happened. And, about 2 years to the day later is when I left to start my own business. And I definitely didn't think that I was going to do that, before I turned 30. So, yeah, it was a game changer. And just in terms of sales tactics, TechTarget was really a lot about the art of sales. Whereas Gong is the science. It
Yeah.
was the Navy SEALs of sales. Everything was super structured and rigid, and I just learned so much, and the talent pool is insane there. So I just soaked it all up from the best salespeople that I've ever met.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome. That is the amazing thing about Gong is yeah, there's just it does have that personality to it. So I absolutely
Yeah,
love that. So you then went on and you started your own business full time.
yep.
Was that tasales.com?
That is TA sales.
Okay.
Yep.
So can you walk us through like what it was like to start that, kind of how you got where you are today? Because I'm also very curious as someone that will eventually go follow that same path. Like,
Yep.
walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. So launching TA sales was, I just want to put this in perspective for folks. It wasn't just like go to Gong and then leave. This was 8 years in the making. So I started my podcast in 2016.
Mhm.
Um, First episode was with my boss at the time. And me and my buddy and my boss brought a 6 pack of beer to his apartment in San Francisco and talked about sales for an hour. And I always knew that I wanted to start a business. My grandfather was a sales leader back in the day,
No way. Okay.
and he was in his 30s. Wife, 3 kids, 2 houses, mortgaged both houses to leave his VP job and buy a business. And that became the family business that he ran for 40 years. And it was profitable every year. And now my dad and uncle and aunt run it. So that was always inspiring to me. I didn't want to do the family business, but I wanted to do something like that. So um, I always just had this vision in my mind of like, if I just keep creating content and an audience and add value to people, like good things are going to happen, build good relationships. And so I was just playing this long game forever, not really having a plan. And then when things started to take off at Gong, I had this poster board in my apartment, and I called it my escape plan. And I wrote out pretty much the game plan of like how am I going to do this. And people started to come inbound and ask me, "Hey, do you do coaching? Do you do training?" I was doing it for free. Then I started charging, one on one. Then I started charging businesses. And so the last 6 months I was at Gong, I started to build in like some pretty decent revenue. Like Nothing that is gonna blow your mind, but it was enough where it could cover my expenses.
Mm.
So I maybe this is too tactical for what
Go
you
no,
care
go
about,
for it.
but um I wanted to get to a point. I'm fairly risk averse, despite leaving to start a business. And so I wanted to have my expenses, relatively like covered based on the revenue. I put a year's worth of expenses in the bank in a checking
Smart.
account.
Yep.
I hired a coach and she was helping me with like the mental side of this. And I said, cool, if I leave Gong, I've got a year's worth of expenses. It's not all my money. I didn't drain my 401k or anything like that. And if I get no customers at all the whole year, I'll lose this money, just this money. And I bet you I can go back and I can work either at Gong or another company and be an AE or a sales manager. And if that's I got this from Tim Ferriss, but if that's my worst case scenario, in my head, I'm like, that's a 1 out of 10. I might be homeless. I might be on the street. I'll never recover financially. I'm just gonna be back where I am. That's like a 7 out of 10. Like that's pretty good. Like I'm gonna
Yeah.
be a tech salesperson, making easily 6 figures. That's my worst case scenario. So to me, it was like, it was a no brainer once I had some of that momentum to just go for it. And then yeah, I left at the end of 2022 from Gong.
I absolutely love it. Let's talk about the mental side a little bit. You kind of touched on it a little bit. You said you got a coach. Like I want to dive into what it was like to actually start it, like from the mental side. Because you go from structure, everyday life. Like I know you've been podcasting for a while. I know you had some side hustles as well that you started and you're doing, I know you've been doing that for a while, but actually going
Yeah.
full time, like what was that like for you? And like what was the experience like of having a coach? Like let's walk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a number of different coaches I probably hired my first coach in 2020. Probably, I think it was around the time when I was making the transition from TechTarget to do something else, maybe even before that. And he helped me with some mental performance around that. Then I hired a woman as I was making this transition because she did something similar. She was a sales director, got laid off, started her own coaching business, and so she was helping me with that. I've had several coaches since, so I'm a big believer in. I probably spent easily over $100,000 in like investment
Yeah.
if it's coaches, seminars, all that books, all that stuff. I'm a big believer in that. And so in that case in particular, the biggest hurdle for me was like, was the mentally around finances. Um, someone's, I don't know who this is, but someone says like the two most addictive things in the world are heroin and a steady paycheck. And there's something to that, every 2 weeks, Gong is going to deposit something. And, even when shit hits the fan, I never missed a president's club in any full year I worked at a company. So I knew maybe I won't hit, but my history tells me every year, more or less, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to exceed quota, which means I'm going to earn more than my OTE. And it might shift on a monthly basis or a quarterly, but in the grand scheme, like I know I'm going to make good money. And when you cut that off, there's a huge difference between give me a product, give me a territory, let me work within these rules and go sell versus go figure it out. You can do whatever you want. You got all the freedom in the world, but you got to figure it out. And if you don't figure it out, you're fucked. You got nothing. It's all on you. And I like that. But the first 6 to 9 months, I was stressed out a lot. I was not sleeping well. Um, I was always looking at the bank account, and there'd be some months where I was killing it. Then the next month I'd have nothing, and it was just like it was a lot mentally. And then over time, really around that 6 to 9 month mark, like things on paper became more stable, but more so in my mind of like, okay, I've seen this ebb and flow happen before. And so my coach was helping me with that. She was helping me with to stay more even keel. She was helping me with like more tangible stuff around like how do you price your products and how long of a contract should you have and how do you build out certain type of proposal and how do you structure different deals and things like that, just things I'd never done before. So She helped me with just get my feet off the ground, pretty much, like get started. And then once I had started to hit my stride, I was, moved on and started working with a different coach, helped me on something else. But yeah, that the first 6 months were really challenging.
What was the most what was there the what was the most challenging moment in those 6 months? Like I really want to dive in because like there's nothing like starting a business that I think just put people through the gauntlet. Like it's a very vulnerable position. Like you don't know really know what you're doing. Like can you share like maybe what your most challenging moment was in that during that time, and just kind of how you overcame it?
Yeah, I mean, I um I treated the first year as like I just want to survive
Yeah,
this first year. Most small businesses don't get past the first year. And without like even a this is the one business that I want to build and this is the thing. It's just like let me just figure out what my move is. Um, and so I did a bunch. The reason I'm bringing that up is like I did a bunch of shit. Like I did, boot camps, I did team trainings, I did one-on-one coaching, I did retreats, I did, probably seven other things I can't even think of right now, and there was a time period, early on in the first 6 months where there was one program that I was working on that was doing really well financially. And I was working on it with a few other people, and it blew up. And it blew up not because of the product; it blew up because of the interpersonal dynamics of the people. And without going into you know more detail, just because there's other people involved. Um, but to me, like I saw that it was crazy because I saw that as like the light at the end of the tunnel. We're killing it. All we got to do is just like do the steps. We just gotta like we got a great product. We just gotta serve the customer, market it, keep rolling this thing and just keep growing. Um, but oftentimes or anytime you're doing something with other people, it's all the challenges are interpersonal. All the challenges are, one person's ego versus another person's ego, or one person's priorities and values versus another person's priority and values. And I took losses like that really hard. I took them very personally. Um, because for me, in my head, I had spent the last 10 years getting ready to leave the corporate world and do
yeah,
this thing. And if I didn't make this happen, then I'm fucked in my head. That's the way I'm thinking. So any sort of failure, like that is just like, man, I'm gonna be back where I started. And what was all this for? Another thing that happened right before I left the corporate world was I was in a different relationship when I was in San Francisco. I was engaged to be married. That did not work out. And so my life shifted really quickly in that, I was gonna get married, we're gonna move to Rhode Island, we're gonna buy a house, we're gonna do all these things. Now, all of a sudden, I'm like, wow, that whole life just doesn't exist anymore. And so I kind of use that as like some inspiration to like motivate me and then like get me going on the side hustle that turned into the real hustle. And so I had some of that emotional baggage going on too, where I'm like, man, I went through all this shit, all this heartache, all this money that was, I wasted on a wedding that didn't happen. And it's like, and now this is what's going to stop me,
yeah.
and, it got me really in a bad spot mentally. And, it was just, yeah, is sometimes it feels like you're just looking out into the void and you're just like, I don't see a path. I don't see a
Yeah.
path to get to where I need to get to. I don't know how to do this. I don't know anyone that's doing this. And it makes you just feel very lonely, it's just me and Jack the dog working here most days at home. And so it's just, yeah, it was a very lonely experience. And it tested my will at times. And yeah, I'm glad I made it through some of that and through some of the troubles. And I'm sure there'll be more bigger troubles coming at some point too. And I'll do my best to, handle those.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing about those things. Those sounds like again big challenges. What you mentioned the void, right? And it just seemed like you feel like you had no options. I know everyone's been there. I know I've been there more than once. What did you tell yourself to keep going? Because I think that's where a lot of people quit. whenever they're dealing with something, it's like there's a void, there's no clear path, and they stop. What did you tell yourself, or what did you do to get yourself to keep going? That's not an easy situation.
See, this is something that I've learned over the last few years is the way you phrase the question is how I would have thought about it before, and the way I did things when I was in sales, which was I would tell myself something. I would go and get some story going in my head to get going. And where I've really leaned into in the last couple of years is like really falling back on like having a support system to help. Because sometimes there's only so much that you could tell yourself. And there's only so many times that you can, get yourself out of the hole. And sometimes it's like, I mentioned, I'm in a relationship now, and my fiance has helped me out a lot with just like navigating some of that, but also like getting around other people that are doing this. So I started reaching out. What I really did was I reached out to a lot of people that are 10 years ahead of me, have been running businesses and going through like, hey, John, like this is where I'm at. I've made this is how I'd kick off most calls. Like, dude, I've made every rookie fucking mistake in the book. This, and this. I'm stressed out. I feel like I got something, but like I can't figure this out. Can you help me? And just humanizing it, being vulnerable, and just like, taking off the LinkedIn sales guy hat and just like putting on the like I need some help hat. I got a lot of help from a lot of really smart people and compassionate people. And I wish I did that more when I was earlier in my sales career, when I was struggling with stuff. I wish I went to people and asked them for help more. So there is this internal dialogue. You have to have that because like you're stuck with you forever, you're never getting rid of yourself. So you got to have that. But man, I'm like, I wish that I spent more time like fostering a support system in that first like 6 to 9 months. And like,
Mhm.
now that I've started to do that, I've really reaped a lot of rewards from it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because that's why there's a lot of in your Kaizen collective like page, there's a lot of stuff about community, things like
Yeah.
that. It makes a lot of sense now. I absolutely love that, and it's a common theme of the guests I've had on. They do a lot of them talk about, especially the most what I call outwardly successful ones. A lot of them talk about community,
Yeah.
community. Um, let's start talking about Kaizen and your focus on getting 1% better every single day. I absolutely love it and respect it. It's because you actually mean it, you actually follow through on it. But for those that are curious, what is the Kaizen Collective and kind of what inspired you to kick it off?
Yeah, the Kaizen Collective is a sales community, like you said, that is helping sales professionals get 1% better every day. So not just in sales, but in all areas of their life. So we talk about our health, our relationships, our mental health, our inner game, all these different aspects that make us people. And the reason that we do that is um, most of, like I had said earlier, in my experience, most of my sales successes come from, things that aren't just sales. So when I'm taking care of my body and my mind well, I show up better on a discovery call. When I have a good relationship with my significant other, or my friends, or my family, you know what? I got more energy to make some extra cold calls. When things are not feeling good, because I have been there. I mentioned my relationship, but I've been, burnt out. I've had a panic attack in the office. I've had family issues, all sorts of stuff. Those were not my best selling days when those types of things were happening. And, we're more isolated than ever, and people feel continuously disconnected from their teams, from their company. And we want to provide a safe space where people can learn and grow, but also support each other and find some like real tribe. Um, the word Kaizen is a Japanese word that means continuous improvement. And so to me, that speaks to my soul. Like anytime that I've wanted to achieve anything in my life, whether it's sales, building a business,
Hmm.
running marathons, getting over a heartbreak, developing a friendship. I'm learning how to play the drums right now.
Nice.
None of it has ever happened in this one brilliant light bulb idea where all of a sudden, like one day I'm average and one day I'm exceptional at something. It's literally never happened in the history of my life. Maybe some people can do that. To me, I'm a slow work in progress. And so the value of like getting 1% better and compounding that over time just like speaks to my soul. And I think um, anyone that's saying that they've got it all figured out is not being true. And so I think we're all works in progress, trying to get a little bit better. And so I'm part of that too. I'm part of that crew that is sharing struggles that I'm having in my sales or business, or in my relationships, or in other parts of my personal life. And I think it's just a really valuable thing for people to have a group of people that are like-minded, that they can learn and grow with. And so I'm really passionate about supporting the people that are in there, and, trying to bring this to more people that, feel like they might need it.
Yeah, and I think it can it's much needed, especially now because things are isolated. We were just talking when we
Mhm.
were off, like off camera or off recording, whatever. But like things are isolated, man, right now. I think
Yeah.
people need this. They need the combo of skills, and they also need the combo of like mindset and like the community. All three is to kind of come together and to be able to help people improve, move forward. I do want to pull the thread a little bit further. I think like one of your superpowers outside looking in, you already know this, but you're very good at like the long game. Like you said, you're podcasting for 8 years. Most people don't podcast for like 8 years or do anything for the long term. You've done like 350 episodes. You really kicked it. Like, what's been one of the keys for you for being so consistent? I think that consistency is very, very, very key here.
Hmm. Well, I think there's probably a few factors. I'm a one of my favorite podcasts I've done. I had the Drift CEO, or I guess he's not the CEO anymore, but he's the founder,
Badass.
David Cancel, on the show. And he said this line that I'll never forget. He said he called himself a learning machine. And I'm like, I am stealing that line right now and tattooing it on my brain. And one thing that he taught was like this concept of virtual mentors, right? And you might never meet, say, Warren Buffett, right? But he has, you know, books upon books around how he structures his life and his work and his business. And you
Yeah.
can do that about many, many people throughout the history of time. And so I do that. And I've got this virtual kind of board of mentors or board of directors that I am following them. I'm reading them. I'm, studying what they've done, what they haven't done. And the majority of those people talk about compounding. They talk about slow growth. They talk about getting a little bit better. They talk about it didn't take me 1 year to get from A to B. It took me 35 years. They talk about planting seeds, the infinite game. These acronyms that you maybe have heard before. That's how things happen in this world. Anything that happens particularly quick, um, might be a little lucky, or might not be long lasting. That's just my belief. That's what I choose to believe. And so for me, like I'm in this for a long game. Like I don't intend to, get rich and retire the next 5 years. Like I intend to be doing this type of stuff for decades, because I think my purpose is to help other people thrive. And right now, that's even niched down to like positively impacting salespeople. And so if I spend the rest of my working life positively impacting salespeople in different ways, whether it's a community, a boot camp, a book, something else I haven't thought of down the line. Like to me, that's a life well lived. And that's like a career that I could be really proud of, and a career that I can do for a long time without burning out, because it's about more than me. It's about more than my
Yeah.
commission check. It's about more than my bank account or my follower count, right? It's like getting the texts, like almost on a daily basis, getting texts from people or LinkedIn DMs or emails around, how impactful something that I've done has been for them, whether it's someone I introed them to that became a best friend, whether it's a course they took, whether it's being part of the community, whether it's listening to the podcast, whatever it is, it's just like it seems like it's positively impacting people, and that's the goal. And so to me, that's the number one value of the business. And if all of that, if everything else, revolves around that, then, I think I'm going to be all set and things are going to take care of themselves.
Yeah, I love that you pointed out that like the game you're playing now is very much to like help other people, and it's something that fulfills you, and so you're able to play a very long game, right? It's not just for this many followers, make this much money, or do X, Y, and Z. It's very much in a it's like for the sake of doing it, Where I think
Yep.
that's one of the key things that it sounds like has helped you to play the long game and what you've been doing. So, dude, so absolutely am impressed. Before I ask the final question, where can people find you and learn more about you? Obviously, you're pretty well known in our sales space, so I don't think it's gonna be too hard. But let's say someone lives under a rock or just hasn't seen you before, where can they find you and learn more about you?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's probably a good place to start. Tom Alamo on LinkedIn or tasales.co is our company page. You can learn more about what we're doing there. And I'm easy to find. You can email me, you can LinkedIn me, you can call me. I'm an easy person to get a hold of.
Cold calling.
Yeah,
Um,
cold call me.
awesome. And it's good to know tasales.co. I messed that up in the beginning.
That's
Sorry.
all good. It's my fault
Uh,
for not being able to get the right domain.
it's all right. It's all right. You're right. It is all your fault, but take no accountability. Anyway, kidding. What is if if someone was only going to listen to the last part of this podcast, what is the one lesson you'd want someone to learn from your story and from you? What's the one lesson you would want them to learn and to take away?
The one lesson I'd want people to take away is to not lone wolf it. So that's like a common term in sales is like the lone wolf that kind of does their own thing to crush quota or whatever. And the Charlie Munger, who's Warren Buffett's business partner, said that the worst way to learn is through only your own experience, right? So there are billions of people alive, and I don't even know how many people that are dead that have done a very similar thing to what you're probably trying to do, that are trying to maybe make some more money, that are trying to start a business, that are trying to sell more, they're trying to be happier, they're trying to have a good relationship, they're trying to lose weight, gain muscle, sleep better. These are all part of the common human experience. So if you're doing it by yourself, you're doing yourself a massive disservice, and you're doing that's working, harder but not smarter. So there's a few ways you can do that, right? You can surround yourself with great people. We've talked about a support system. You could find a mentor. You could find a virtual mentor and read their books and listen to their podcasts. You could ask random people for advice. You could ask wise old people about what they regret and what they like. But you got to find someone or someone's that can help you out on the path. Because even if you do figure it out and you get to the top of the mountaintop and you look around and it's just you, it's probably not worth it.
Yeah,
So I would definitely say, like, try to, in different ways, either in real life or virtually or a combination, surround yourself with great people and watch as your life starts to follow suit and go up and up, relative to the people that you're surrounding yourself with.
absolutely love it. I like that a lot. Don't be a lone wolf. Surround yourself with good people. Your life will improve. Tom, thank you. I've learned a lot from just being here, and I'm so grateful we had a chance to meet. There's a lot of just, yeah, you've got a good soul, good heart, a good purpose, and I really, really appreciate you. Thank you for coming on.
Likewise, John. Appreciate you, man.